Hey, hello, this is Professor Game, where we interview successful practitioners of games, gamification, and game thinking who bring us the best of their experiences to get ideas, insights, and inspiration to help us in the process of getting students to learn what we teach. And I'm Rob Alvarez. I work at IE Business School Publishing, where we create interactive and engaging learning materials. We wanted to start with a blast, and who better than Yu-kai Chou, who is an author and international keynote speaker and lecturer on gamification. He's the original creator of the gamification framework Octalysis, founder of the Octalysis group, and the author of Actionable Gamification. In 2003, he became one of the earliest pioneers in gamification. In 2015, Yu-kai was rated number 1 amongst the Gamification Gurus Power 100 by Rise, and also awarded Gamification Guru of the Year award for both 2014 and 2015 by the World Gamification Congress. He has helped a variety of companies from seed-stage startups to Fortune 500 companies. His work has been featured in Forbes, The Wall Street Journal, The World Journal, Business Insider, PBS, and many more. So Yu-kai, are you ready to engage?
I am completely ready to engage.
That's amazing. So Yu-kai, let's get started. The first question I'd like to make is, what does a regular day with Yu-kai look like?
Well, there's no real regular day for me. Every day is different because sometimes I work on client projects and it's a lot of design work. Sometimes I travel a lot, probably a third of my time I'm traveling, a lot of time overseas to Europe, India, Asia, different places, and they're all different. A lot of times I'm filming videos or writing my book, so it kind of just varies. So I kind of switch between writing to designing to speaking, probably a lot of those three, and then interacting with my audience, I guess, and phone calls and meetings.
Well, it sounds very exciting. Having a variety of activities in different days sounds like a very good thing to have variety and to keep your engagement with whatever you're doing, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's nice because the projects are varied all over the place. So some of them are in the financial industry, some of them in healthcare, some of them are e-commerce, and then some of them are HR related, some of them marketing. So it's just I'm always learning new fields and new industries, but always just applying that same set of behavioral design and gamification to those fields.
That's great. So Yukai, the next thing we wanted to get into, as we all know, you're a guru in gamification. You've had some great experiences. You've done some great stuff. However, I'm sure, as anybody in the audience, that there has also been some downs, some difficult moments. And I wanted you to take us to a moment in time where you had the story where you felt was the worst application of gamification that you've ever faced. You don't have to name any companies. You don't have to name any specific projects. Just tell us that story.
Okay, well, it looks like we're starting with the big bang, starting with the biggest failures, right? Okay,
That's it.
so I think a lot of times the worst application comes out into actually the implementation of a project and also the bureaucracy. Because usually I talk about as long as you can define a desired behavior, we can use gamification and game thinking to improve that desired behavior. So the things that we can help are getting people to do things that they don't know how to do, like fly a plane across the ocean if they don't know how to fly a plane, or if it's purely technical, like doing solving facial recognition problems with technology. Now, given the motivation set of challenges, the frustrating things are just designing something that works really, really well, but then when it goes through the bureaucracy of a company and it comes out, it just doesn't end up being so great. So I guess like I said, I won't name names, but I was working with a very large e-commerce company, one that I'm pretty sure everyone in the audience has heard about before. And the goal is to drive certain good behavior and decrease certain bad behavior. So I spent a lot of time designing through a lot of these intrinsic core drives. I added epic meaning and calling to the recommendations. There's a lot of those intricacies between the triggers, the feedback mechanics, the rewards, and the win states. I'm telling the clients, look, it has to be this A and then B and then wait 4 seconds and then the C. And then the client, and this happens somewhat regularly. The client is very impatient, so they're like, yeah, I get it. Okay, what's next? No. You have to do A and then B and then C. They're like, oh yeah, totally. And then when an action, and first of all, it took about 2 years for something to come out, which was a pain to wait for. But when it came out, it was something complete. It's not even ABC. It's like WGY or something. And it's just completely obliterated everything I did. It has some of the resemblance. Like I can pick out, oh, I think that's something that's related to my design, and that's something related to my design. But it was just a totally different monster. And then I said, hey, how come it's so different? They're like, no, I think it's the same thing. It's what you design.
It's exactly what Yu-kai did, or not
Yes,
really.
and so it's just a very frustrating experience, and this happens a lot, right? It's just a lot of times the engagements and the subtleties I often talk about in a game. Sometimes you have clones, right? One game copied another game, and somehow the clone is just a massive failure, or sometimes the clone is a huge success compared to the original, right? And it's these, and they all have points, they all have badges, they all have quests, they all have this leveling up tree. So what makes the successful game successful? That is a very subtle detail that I realize that most people don't understand, and it changes a lot.
Very much. So shifting now, instead of going to the worst moment, and that was a great story that you gave us. I would like you to tell us a story of when you faced a great challenge and, of course, solved it successfully using gamification.
Okay. So I think one interesting challenge is gamifying the learning of forex trading. So this is currency trading, buying, investing in the US dollar or the Japanese yuan. And so we were brought in by a client in Australia to turn that into a fun gamified experience. And this, you can understand anything in finance usually feels dull and boring. And even if people are investing money, they usually are more comfortable with stock investment, right? Companies. The forex trading seems intimidating. That you can use 100 times leverage to trade. So what we end up doing with them is we created a game called Trade Samurai, which is basically you are going through the samurai journey of trying to battle the evil forces of greed and fear, and
Wow.
learning the 5 books: the Book of Earth, which is the fundamentals; the Book of Water, the technicals; the Wind, Fire, and Enlightenment. And then you have a character. You unlock different gear as you go. There's one example where you're playing a game that's what is that game called again? The Flappy Birds, kind of like Flappy Birds, but
Okay.
you're riding a blind dragon in a cave, and you have to look at the chart data to tell it, hey, you should go up right now, you should go down, based on the chart data. And if you do it wrong, then he hits his head, and it's like, oh no, the dragon hit his head. So this is a design that we actually just launched in Australia. We launched the first version of it, and the data looks amazing. It's actually so the whole goal of the whole app is, at the end of the day, you want them to go from not knowing anything about forex to actually want to do live trading with real money. So
Wow.
actually, what we've seen is that 50% of the users
Bang.
actually 50% of users actually finish the game and put in their emails saying, I want to learn more towards live trading. So it's an
Wow.
amazing stat.
50% sounds
Yeah,
huge.
50% of downloads, not even 50% of people who play it. Downloads converts to people giving us emails at the end of the game.
So storytelling, I can tell from what you were telling us, storytelling is like a very central element of the gamification you were explaining, right?
Yes, and more importantly, it's epic meaning and calling. So storytelling is useful because it allows you to bring out these core drives like epic meaning and calling or social influence. But just because you have storytelling doesn't mean it's necessarily engaging. It depends on whether the story brings out the right emotions.
That's it. And that's what you bring from the Octalysis analysis, right?
Yep.
That's great. So we wanted to go to shift to the next question. Of course, the Octalysis framework is the pretty straightforward answer, and I'm sure. I mean, I've heard you talk about it many times, and I know it's a very complex one. But I'm gonna challenge you here to give us an explanation of what process do you follow to applying gamification to a situation, which of course I guess will be Octalysis, but I'm going to challenge you to do it in just less than 5 minutes. Okay?
Sure. So the
Okay.
Octalysis framework is a framework I created, and is based on a study of, like what I said earlier, what exactly makes a game fun and exciting. And so it breaks down all motivation into the 8 core drives. So everything you do is based on one or more of these 8 core drives, which means that if there's none of these 8 core drives, there's zero motivation, no behavior happens. And then out of those 8 core drives, there's different natures of those core drives. So there's what we call the white hat core drives that make people feel powerful, in control, they feel good, but there's no sense of urgency. So, we talked about epic meaning and calling, core drive 1, that's a white hat core drive. And those are good for things like building long-term relationships, a loyal community, employees who want to stay for the long run, things like that. Then you have the black hat core drives that drive urgency, obsession, even addiction. But then long run, it may leave a bad taste in your mouth because you feel like you're not in control of your behavior. So those are good.
So
Mhm.
white and black, does it refer to good and bad or not exactly?
Not exactly. White hat just means that you enjoy, you feel good about it, you feel like you're in control. Black hat just means you don't feel like you're in control, but you still might enjoy it. It's just you're not in control of your own behavior.
Great.
Yeah. So a lot of times gambling, addiction, or people like to watch Game of Thrones, right? That's core
Yeah.
drive 7, which means it's black hat and intrinsic. So people enjoy it, but sometimes they feel like they can't control themselves. They have to watch one episode after another, after another, after another. And so that's a black hat intrinsic core drive 7.
Maybe especially with gambling, that's when many people associate like gamification with some negative aspects, and it's not necessarily that way. I mean, gamification, as I understand it, and I'm sure you'll agree with me, it's a tool, and tools can be used very well for great things, like a hammer. A hammer can be used to build a house and to help build a house, or they can be used to bang somebody's head. I mean, if you use it right, it can bring great results. However, if you use it wrong, you can do it for the wrong things, right?
Yeah, for sure. So it's just understanding the nature of how our brains work, and then understanding that some make us feel good and some make us feel compelled but less good. So, but a lot of times, for instance, people use the black hat to get people to do the white hat things. For instance, that's why people pay a gym trainer to call them a loser, right? When you get called a loser and tell you to do more push-ups, you feel bad, you're not happy, but it compels you to do it. And then afterwards, you actually feel accomplished, right? That's white hat again, which means and then you thank them. Thank you for being so strict on me, right? And so it's a balance. And black hat again, it's good for short-term transactions like getting people to donate money to your cause, the closing sales, fundraising, things like that, getting people to register. These are high friction, one-time actions. And black hat is great at that. Whereas white hat is more for long term. And of course, you want to interchange between them. And then we have what we call the left brain versus right brain core drives. And the
Okay.
left brain core drives aren't geographically located on the left side of your brain, but it symbolically means the logical brain. And it deals with what we call extrinsic motivation. So things we do for a reward, a purpose, or a goal, but we don't necessarily enjoy the activity itself. So once we obtain the reward, we get our badges, we hit our milestones, or we just get used to the reward, we stop doing that activity. And then there's the right brain core drives that deal with intrinsic motivation. So things that, these are things that we just enjoy doing so much that we would even pay money just to experience it. And so that's the dynamic. And a lot of times the left people design for extrinsic motivation because it's easier to put a reward on activity you want to see. But oftentimes, sometimes it kills the intrinsic joy of that activity. It's called the over-justification effect. So that's the Octalysis framework. From the basic level, as a consultant, there are actually multiple steps. The first step is to do the strategy dashboard, defining different things like business metrics, users, win state, triggers, feedback mechanic, things like that. Then it's the brainstorming session, which is we use the 8 core drives to come with lots of ideas, usually between 60 to 100. And then there's something called the PE feature list.
Wow, 60 to 100. That
Yeah.
sounds like huge, right?
Yeah, that's usually the process. For our clients, when we go through brainstorming, usually on average, so it's between the 60 to 100 run. And usually a lot of ideas come out, right? Because we're thinking about the 4 phases: discovery, onboarding, scaffold, endgame, and the 8 core drives in each of one of these phases. So that's 32 elements we're already considering, and each element can come up with multiple ideas. So usually a lot of ideas come out of that. Then we have the PE
And
feature
to,
list.
to,
Mhm.
to arrive, sorry to interrupt you again, but to arrive to these 60 to 100 ideas, how long do you normally like take?
Are you asking about me or most people?
Yeah, and your experience, of course.
Okay, so for me, I think usually if I dedicate like my full time to it, probably a day or two. But usually for normal Octalysis consultant, maybe a week or two.
But that's quick. I mean, for that amount of ideas, are those ideas that are already like filtered or just like brainstorming type of
These
ideas?
these all these ideas are basically utilizing those 8 core drives to drive the desired actions that were defined in the strategy dashboard before this step. So they're all
Okay,
based on the core drives, behavioral science, and whatnot. Now, it doesn't mean we're going to do all of them, right? So they're not filtered. The next
exactly.
step, the PE feature list, which stands for power and ease, filters that down. So we look at the power, how effective each feature is, and we look at the ease, which is how easy it is to implement it. And then we combine those scores to come up with a much smaller list of what to do. Then we have a battle plan spreadsheet that we have to create, which is the reward schedule, the balance economy, the activity loop, leveling up, if there is stuff like that. So it's every mathematical detail is figured out. And then finally, the last part of our work in that process is the concept wireframe. So we turn all these ideas, concepts, mathematical formulas into wireframes that the users interact with, because that's the only thing they see, right? So we define these wireframes, create
Like
this.
the end result.
Yeah, the storyboard. We don't make things pretty, but we make things engaging. So we give that set to the clients to make turn into a graphically more stunning experiences. So that's our process.
Wow, that's amazing. We didn't make it to the 5 minute mark, but it was very engaging, so I'm just gonna let it pass. So moving on to the second part. In this part, we were focused mainly on stories and how do you do things, like very maybe longer answers. The second part of this interview, I want to focus on something a bit quicker. So these kind of questions are maybe answered in sentences. Sometimes you'll find something that you want to expand a bit upon, and that's great. But you'll find that these questions are a lot quicker. All right.
Okay.
So the first one is name one best practice in gamification.
Use Octalysis.
I saw that one coming. Where can we find out about Octalysis? I'll
uh,
put these on the show notes anyway. But
if you go to octalysis.com or you just Google gamification framework, it should be the first result.
great. The next one, what is your favorite game? It doesn't have to be a video game. It can be a board game. It can even be a sport. But what's your favorite game?
Um, I think I spent the longest time playing chess. I was a chess coach, actually. I like chess. StarCraft was probably the best computer game at its time. StarCraft 1. Nowadays, I play Heroes of the Storm.
Wow. So you never stop playing. That's a good mojo.
Sure.
After having Yu-kai Chou, it's hard to get somebody as great. But the next question is, who would you like to have interviewed in Professor Game?
I do really much enjoy Jane McGonigal's work, her books, and her speaking. So if you can get her on, that'd be great. And also a friend of Michael Wu from Lithium is
Yep.
he talks a lot of great content about gamification as well as big data. So he's a good guy too.
Great. Those are two very good recommendations. If you can help us get a handle on them, it would be great after we finish the recording.
We can talk about that.
Sure. What book would you recommend to our listeners apart from, of course, actionable gamification?
Okay, so there's a few books. So I like a lot of some of the core psychological books, like Robert Cialdini's Influence, Daniel Pink's Drive, Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow. I think in terms of gameful design, I think the Reality is Broken by Jay McGonigal is probably still one of the canon pieces, especially the first half. Yeah, so there's a
That's great.
big
Those are
collection.
great recommendations. Great recommendations. The next one is something that I've gotten from our engagers, our audience, and they're asking very much about how to get into the world of gamification as a gamification, be a gamification consultant, how to bring gamification to their own companies. So, what would you advise, or how would you recommend them to get started in the gamification industry?
I think a few steps. One, read as much as possible. Start writing about it too on your blogs. Build a personal brand. But I think the most effective way is find someone that you already respect who's already doing really well in the space. Reach out to them, and then show that you're very eager and you have a lot of a good work ethics and ability to help them out. So the thing is, like, for instance, someone like me, my company, we have more clients than we can handle. So I have to turn down a lot, and I'm trying to train people fast enough to handle this, but it takes time, and time takes a lot of my time too. But we're always lacking good people. But it's just, if a person shows up, they say they want to try to help up, they want to be a trainee, and they seem smart. Sometimes we give them, but like my managing director, Yoris Bierda, that's what he did a few years ago, and now he's leading a company that runs gamification. A few others, everyone on my team did that, and I'm sure there's lots of other gamification practitioners where if you reach out, and again, they get a lot of people reach out to them, so you really need to prove. And sometimes they try a few people who reach out and they turn out to be flaky or unreliable. So you really have to prove that, hey, look, you're willing to go the extra mile. You're really passionate. You can do a lot. And then if they feel like you can actually save them some time in exchange of them helping you, giving you more opportunities and giving you some mentorship, that probably works out.
So it sounds like the industry of gamification is in a very sweet spot in that sense, right? That you actually have more people reaching out to you in the sense of clients than you can actually handle. So,
I'm not sure if you would say it's the industry itself, because
okay,
I think it's at any industry. I'm very blessed in the way that I've achieved a pretty premier brand name in the industry, and I think if you are known as
absolutely.
top in any industry, you'll get a good amount of business. I think for the average person who goes around saying he's a gamification consultant, it's probably still harder. Well, much
Yeah,
harder
makes
in
sense.
general.
Yeah,
So
but I guess that applies. Like, I mean, if you just come out of the woods and say, "Look, I'm a whatever consultant," and you don't have a either a brand or something, some experience to back that up, I mean, it's pretty tough to just say, "I am a whatever consultant."
yes, one trend that I noticed is that a few years ago, it was just sexy to talk about gamification. People love to talk about it, but companies are still hesitant to approve budgets. Nowadays, it's not sexy to talk about gamification, so you don't see about it as much on TechCrunch or Mashable, things like that. But actually, there's a lot more companies approving budgets for it, because usually they need a term to be thrown around for years before they feel comfortable doing something with it. So there's actually more business opportunities. It's just less hypey.
Yeah, that's it. Fully agree. And this is the last like actual question, and it's a random question. We've curated it before arriving here, but it's one of the questions that has been sent out by the audience. So I'm going to read you a short text. So the idea is that you help this person or give us a quick thought process on how would you approach this issue using gamification. All right.
Sure, that can be fast.
Okay, of course, it's just a quick thought process. It's not the 60 ideas that that you get in a couple of days. This is just a quick thing.
Sure.
So, this person says, I am a marketing professor, and the objective is to engage my students into learning how to create a marketing plan. I normally do a regular class explaining the steps for the creation of the marketing plan, and then I send them as a homework for the end of the period to create a marketing plan for a product or service of the company they work for today or last worked in. The audience are the MBA, these are MBA students. Currently, they are pretty disengaged in the class, and they feel that the subject gets too theoretical, and they have problems with creating the plan by themselves, since of course, as he can see every time, they are not fully engaged with the topic. So how do you think he can use gamification to help them learn better?
Okay. So in all challenges, especially these quickies, we think through the 8 core drives, right? Applying the 8 core drives. So the question is, right now, what is the motivation for these MBAs to sit through the class and do the desired behavior? And right now, it's probably a lot of it's loss and avoidance. Oh, they don't want to flunk the class. They don't want to fail, so they do it. Maybe some development accomplishment. If they do well, they can actually get a good grade and advance. But the key question is, how can we add the other core drives to experience epic meaning and calling, right? Sometimes we just talked about, hey, it's a little theoretical. I don't know if it's actually useful. So what if the class engages with an actual nonprofit entity and they have a marketing challenge? So you're saying, hey, look, World Vision has this issue, and so we're going to have a competition where you guys can design a good marketing campaign for World Vision, and whichever one they pick, will actually go into the world and help people in third world countries. Right now, there's a lot of epic media and calling. There's a little bit of that social influence, that competition dynamic that makes it a little more fun. And obviously, if you want to win and you can see impact, you see why this is helpful. And of course, this immediately becomes something useful to share. It's like, hey, this project becomes something really great in your resume, right? It's something that, because a lot of people are taking their MBAs to buff up their resumes anyway. But instead of just saying I got an A, it's saying, hey, look, I did this case study, or I did this campaign for this entity. It's almost like an internship. You want to give them a lot of Core Drive 3 empowerment of creativity and feedback. So a lot of times the issue is that people will come with a lot of creative ideas, but there's no feedback, or they submit something and all they get is a B or C or whatnot. But you want the class to be able to present their creativity, and then have immediate feedback. So maybe have the class comment on each other's creative ideas and modify it. Maybe you start off with every individual.
Peer review or something like that, right?
Yeah. So maybe it's even a good idea to have at the beginning, each individual comes up with their own ideas. And then after, 3 days a week, then they form into the group of 6. And out of the 6, there can only be one idea that comes out of it. So everyone has to throw around their original one single individual ideas, but eventually make each other's better and combine into one best idea. And then again, the whole classroom discusses that, and maybe that gets combined into the one final campaign that will be used by this nonprofit. So that's something that could be useful. A lot of times,
and it doesn't even sound expensive to implement.
Oh yeah, a lot of times it's just like games, right? Games could be World of Warcraft, which is really expensive to make, or hide and seek, which really just has no technology. It's just
for free.
People keeping score, right? But you can have fun with both.
That's a big fear sometimes, especially in the educational area, that people feel that, but if I do that, I'll have to spend money on designers and programmers and etc. And it as your example greatly exemplifies, sometimes it just takes a bit of effort and absolutely no money.
Yeah. And sometimes it's a board game, sometimes it's flashcards. It's really about the game design as opposed to the actual technology. And this is why I say, some games are visually stunning, but it's a huge failure. And some games are kind of ugly, like Minecraft or even RuneScape, and people are addicted to it. So it's about how these core drives play into our psychology as opposed to how technological advanced they are.
Well, thank you very much, Yu-kai Chou, for coming to the show and engaging with our engagers, which is the name we give to our audience. The final piece of time that we want from you is how can our audience, the engagers, engage with you? Any final advice you would like to give them, and then we'll say game over.
Yeah, okay. So you can write me anytime at yukai@yukai.com. You could find me on Twitter, which is @yukai.chou. Very non-creative names, or
very straightforward.
My name, yeah, pretty straightforward. Final advice. I think the final advice is going to be pretty cliche, which is if you really are passionate about something, you really believe in it, just stick to it, right? I was lucky in the sense that at the beginning, I just really liked gamification, and it was not an industry, there was no business opportunity, but I believed in how games were powerful and how if you use it correctly, you can make positive change. And then, I've got people laughed at me, whatnot, but over the years, it really became something important, and I was one of the first people to start doing this. So if you stick to it enough, you're passionate about it, you keep doing it, you can become the best at it. Nowadays I see people jumping out into the industry because they see a money opportunity, but they clearly aren't passionate about games. They aren't passionate about game design. They're just trying to make a quick buck, and you can tell from their work it's just not as quality. So if you're passionate about it, you can create the best work. And at the end of the day, success is really simple. Just two things, right? Do the best work and be known for it, right? If you get those two down, then you're successful.
That's absolutely it.
Yep.
Well, thank you very much, Yu-kai, and we'll catch you once again. We'll see you over the social media, and we'll see you next time.
Sounds great.
Thank you.
Talk to you later. Bye.
Hey, Engagers. Thank you for listening to Professor Game Podcast. If you want more interviews with incredible guests like Yu-kai Chou and lots of awesomeness from Professor Game, then take a minute to subscribe and rate this podcast on iTunes. You can find a direct link on professorgame.com/iTunes. Hey, if you like the show and want a free gift, then subscribe, give us a 5-star rating and a positive review on iTunes, and then send a screenshot where we show this to professor@professorgame.com with review gift in the subject line, and we'll send it to you. Before you click continue for your next mission, would you like to know how Scott Reinke is solving dropouts of at-risk students at Ball State University using gamification? Well, then go ahead and listen to the next episode of Professor Game. It's already available. See you there.